They said love never betrays. But love did betray me, not from an enemy, not from a stranger, but from the one I carried in my arms as a child. I still remember the cold kiss on my cheek, the heavy door closing behind me, and the silence that followed. That was the day my life was signed away without my consent. The day I stopped being a mother in his eyes and became a burden instead, but I wasn't finished. And I wasn't going to stay buried. My name is Élise Martin. I was born in Lyon, France, and for 60 years I lived my life with the discipline of a teacher and the heart of a mother who never gave up. I spent more than 3 decades in classrooms filled with chalk dust and restless children, raising not just my son, but entire generations of students. When my husband Jean died young, it was Gabriel, my boy, who became my reason to breathe. I told myself I would pour everything into him, the strength of my back, the ache in my knees, the tiredness in my eyes because he was my only child. The one piece of Jean I had left, I taught literature in a modest lycée, and I taught Gabriel life at home. I saved every franc, then every euro, and when money ran short I took on tutoring in the evenings. My hands became dry from writing on blackboards, my voice often cracked from hours of explaining poetry and equations, but I never complained. I wore the same coat for 10 winters, patched in the elbows, because Gabriel needed a computer for university. I sold Jean's old watch, the one he had inherited from his own father, to help Gabriel start his business. I never once asked for thanks. I told myself love would circle back when it mattered most. When Gabriel married Camille, I welcomed her with open arms. She was beautiful, ambitious, and always dressed like she had stepped out of a boutique window. I told myself she would be the daughter I never had. I cooked her favorite dishes, asked about her family, included her in our Sunday traditions. At first, she smiled back, but I noticed something in her eyes, sharp, calculating. She was polite, but distant. And slowly, after the wedding, Gabriel's tone toward me began to shift. It was small things at first. He stopped asking me for advice and started telling me what I should or shouldn't do. "Mommen, you should hire someone to clean the house. At your age it's too much. Or maybe it's time you stopped walking to the market alone." He laughed when he said these things. But behind the laugh was a firmness, like decisions were already made without me. Camille would nod along, her lips pressed into that polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. I tried to ignore it. Parents tell themselves many comforting lies, and my favorite was this: he is just busy, stressed with business, trying to build a future. But deep down, I felt the ground shifting. One Tuesday morning, I fainted in the kitchen. It was nothing serious, low blood sugar, too many hours standing without breakfast. When I came to, I was on the floor, staring at the cracked tiles I had scrubbed for years. That evening, Gabriel rushed over with Camille. He looked concerned, at least on the surface. "Mommen, we just want what's best for you," he said, patting my shoulder. Camille chimed in, "It must be hard keeping up a house like this. You should think about taking it easy." They started asking about my papers, my insurance, my accounts. "Just in case," Gabriel said, smiling like it was an innocent question. They brought me soup in glass containers, spoke softly about how much they worried for me, and I thought foolishly that maybe this was love coming back round. I didn't know that behind my back, they had already spoken to a lawyer. I didn't know they had whispered to the neighbors that I was slipping mentally, that I was forgetful, that I was unsafe alone. I didn't know Camille had already called the bank, pretending to be me. A week later, Gabriel suggested we go to lunch. "Just the 3 of us," he said. "We're going to spoil you, Mommen." I wore a simple dress, not my best shoes, because I thought it was just a casual meal. I didn't bring a bag. I didn't bring a phone charger. I thought we'd be back by afternoon. Instead, they drove me to a building with beige walls and plastic flowers in the hallway. The sign outside said EHPAD, nursing home. I laughed at first, thinking it must be a mistake. "What is this?" I asked. Gabriel squeezed my hand. "Just for a few days, rest up. The nurse will help you get settled." He hugged me tight like he meant it. Camille kissed my cheek, her lip gloss cold on my skin. And then they turned and walked away. I stood there in the lobby with my bag still in the car, staring at strangers in uniforms, realizing I had been left behind like luggage. The nurse guided me to a small room, one bed, one dresser, no family photos, no books. "Where is my son?" I asked. "He just left," she replied. Then she showed me a stack of forms. My name was there, but not in my handwriting. Boxes were checked: medical consent, residential admission, observation status. His signature, not mine. I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, my hands folded like I was in church, trying not to shake. But I shook anyway. The next morning, I asked to see the administrator. I told her there must be a mistake. I am not senile. I am not dying. I do not belong here. She looked at me like I was a ghost trying to argue for a second life. "Your son said you're not safe on your own," she explained. "He told us to expect a long-term placement." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Something inside me whispered that if I screamed, I would only prove them right. So I swallowed the scream and sat quietly. But inside, I was burning. Days passed. On the 4th day, I finally got access to a phone. I called Gabriel. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Then I tried Camille. Blocked. The same woman who once cried in my kitchen about how hard marriage was had blocked me. I sat in the stiff chair by the window, looking out at a courtyard filled with people who barely remembered their own names. Some drooled. Some yelled at invisible figures. Some stared into nothingness. And I thought, is this how I end? After everything I gave, after every meal I skipped so my son could eat, after every night I stayed awake to correct essays and check homework just to keep him in school, was this my reward? No, that night, I asked the night nurse for a pen and a notebook. I like to journal, I told her. She smiled kindly and brought me a little spiral notebook from the activities closet. I didn't write poetry. I didn't write prayers. I wrote facts, dates, transactions, account numbers, names, deeds, every detail I could remember. I wrote down the contact of my lawyer, Clara Dupont, who had once been my student. She hadn't heard from me in years, but I knew she had never taken me off her list. I wrote like it was a battle plan, because it was. I wasn't confused. I wasn't delusional. And I sure as hell wasn't dead. They thought I wouldn't notice the frozen bank accounts. They thought I wouldn't recognize that my name had vanished from my own utility bills. They thought that because I was old, I couldn't fight. But I had raised a man. I had survived a marriage. I had survived breast cancer. And I would survive this too. But not just survive. I would return, and when I did, I wouldn't beg for my keys back. I would burn the lock's dot. Every day in that place was a test. The meals were tasteless, the walls smelled of bleach and despair, but I learned to wait. Waiting is an art. Teachers know well. We wait for silence before beginning a lesson. We wait for stubborn children to find their own answers. I would wait for my moment, and it came one Friday morning. A nurse knocked softly and said, "Madam Martin, someone is here for you." I expected Gabriel, maybe a fake apology, maybe another trick. But when the door opened, it was Clara, my student from 20 years ago, now a woman in her 40s, with a briefcase in hand and fire in her eyes. "Madam Martin," she said, her voice trembling. "It's really you. Are you safe?" As safe as a woman can be, I answered, when her only child locks her away and thinks she won't bite back. She pulls up a chair. Tell me everything, so I did. I gave her the notebook, page after page of dates, transactions, forged signatures. She listened, her jaw tightening with every detail. "We'll fight this," she said. "You're not staying here another week. And if they give us trouble, we'll sue them too, for the first time in weeks." I felt like I could breathe that night as I lay in the narrow bed. I stared at the ceiling and thought of Gabriel as a little boy. His hand in mine on the way to school, his smile when he brought home good grades, the way he clung to me when Jean died. I had carried him through storms, and now he had thrown me into one. The betrayal cut deep, but betrayal has a strange effect. It sharpens you. It reminds you what you are still capable of. I turned on my side, closed my eyes, and whispered into the dark, "You think I'm finished, Gabriel. But you have no idea what a woman becomes when she has nothing left to lose." The days inside that place blurred together, each one shaped by the same sterile routine. Breakfast trays with lukewarm porridge, hallways smelling of disinfectant, the slow shuffle of wheelchairs against linoleum floors. At night, the hum of televisions in other rooms mixed with the moans of patients who no longer knew what year it was. I was 60, but I felt trapped in a place meant for those far closer to the end than I was. Every morning I reminded myself, I am not finished. I am not invisible. And I will not let them bury me while I still breathe. Clara's visit had lit something inside me, a spark I hadn't felt in years. When she held my notebook and said we would fight, I believed her. She was once a shy girl in my classroom who sat in the second row, chewing on her pencil while writing essays about courage and justice. Now here she was, a grown woman, standing for me with more fire than I had left in my tired bones. Perhaps life had brought us full circle. Once I taught her lessons, now she was teaching me that I wasn't powerless. She came back the next day with papers under her arm. "I've reviewed the signatures, Madam Martin. The power of attorney your son filed is a forgery. The strokes don't match your handwriting. And the medical certificate completely fabricated. I've already spoken to the doctor who supposedly signed it. He says he never declared you incompetent." Her voice was calm, precise, every sentence carrying the weight of evidence. I sat across from her, my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to keep them from trembling. Not from weakness, but from the anger that kept rising every time Gabriel's face flashed in my mind. My son, my boy. The one I pawned my wedding ring for, the one I worked late nights to clothe and feed. And he had signed me away like I was an inconvenient suitcase. Clara leaned forward. "We're filing an emergency motion with the court. We'll request the immediate revocation of the forged power of attorney and a formal evaluation of your mental capacity. I'll also move to freeze any access he has to your accounts until the court sorts this out." I nodded slowly. "Do what you must. I trust you. Do you want to return home once this is over?" She asked carefully. The word home struck me like a stone. My little house in Lyon, the one with the ivy crawling up the walls, the kitchen that smelled of garlic and thyme, the garden Jean had planted roses in before he died. That house wasn't just bricks and wood. It was the place I bled for, wept in, dreamed in. And Gabriel was living there now, as if I had already been erased. "I don't know," I whispered. "It doesn't feel like home anymore if betrayal sleeps in its walls." Clara's eyes softened. "Then perhaps you'll build a new one. We'll get to that later. For now, we focus on the fight." The next week was a storm of paperwork and meetings. The administrator of the nursing home grew nervous when Clara arrived with official letters. I watched him stumble through excuses, claiming they had only acted in my best interest. "Your son insisted you were confused," he muttered. Clara's reply cut through the air like a blade. Confusion is not proven by gossip. It's proven by evidence, and you have none. Within days, the court scheduled a hearing. I was escorted there in a van, my notebook clutched like armor. Sitting in the courtroom felt strange. I had spent years teaching literature about justice and morality, but now I was the one whose dignity had to be defended. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair tied in a bun, looked at me over her glasses. Madam Martin, do you understand why you are here today? Yes, Your Honor, I said firmly. I am here because my son claimed I could not manage my life. But I can, she nodded. A psychiatrist from the nursing home testified that I showed no signs of dementia, no confusion, no decline that warranted such measures. Clara presented the forged documents, pointing out every inconsistency, every false mark. My own words spilled from the notebook, dates when Gabriel withdrew funds without my knowledge. Times he told neighbors I was forgetful, moments he manipulated me into handing over bills so he could handle them. When the judge turned back to me, she asked gently, "Do you wish to continue under your son's care? Or do you revoke his authority entirely?" I lifted my chin. I revoke everything. He is not my guardian. He is the thief of my peace. The room was silent. Even the clerk paused, pen hovering above paper. For the first time in weeks, my voice carried weight again. The ruling came swiftly. The forged power of attorney was null and void. Control of my finances and property returned to me. The nursing home was ordered to discharge me immediately. When the gavel struck, a deep breath left my chest. One I hadn't realized I'd been holding since the day Gabriel closed that car door and left me here. I was free. Clara drove me out of that place in her small Peugeot, rain streaking the windows as we crossed the river back into the city. The streets of Lyon looked different, still familiar, but sharper somehow, as if betrayal had peeled back a layer of innocence. I stared out the window at the cafes, the bakeries, the old men smoking by the corner to back, and thought the world kept moving while I was caged. But I'm moving again now. Would you like to go home? Clara asked as we pulled into the city centre. I shook my head. Not yet. Instead, she booked me into a modest extended stay apartment. It wasn't much, just a kitchenette, a small table, and a bed, but it was mine, my choice. Freedom never smelled so clean. That night, Clara and I sat with cups of herbal tea, papers spread across the table. She explained the next steps, filing criminal charges for elder exploitation, freezing the accounts Gabriel had siphoned money from, ensuring the deed to the house was still legally in my name. You have the law on your side, Clara said. But you also have something else. What's that? She smiled faintly. Your discipline, your silence, your patience. Most people break in situations like this. You didn't. You wrote everything down. You turned pain into evidence. That's strength, Madam Martin. That's how you win. Her words stayed with me long after she left. I thought back to the nights in the nursing home when I pressed pen to paper, scribbling in the dim light while other residents groaned in their sleep. At the time, it felt like desperation, but now I saw it differently. It had been strategy. A teacher's instinct. Document, analyze, prepare. The following days were a whirlwind. Court officials served Gabriel with papers. He tried to call me. My phone buzzed with numbers I recognized, but I let them ring. I didn't want to hear his excuses. He had already spoken loudly enough when he signed me away. Camille, on the other hand, sent a message on social media. "We're your family. I can't believe you're doing this." This was supposed to be our future. I stared at the message for a long time before typing the single reply. "No, I was your past. And you buried me too early." Then I blocked her. Every night I sat by the apartment window, looking out at the lights of the city, thinking of Jean. What would he have said if he were alive? He would have told me to fight. He would have told me to remember my worth. I held onto that thought. When the preliminary hearings ended, Clara told me we had secured not just my finances, but also legal grounds to pursue damages. We can press further, she said. Make him answer for what he did. I considered it. The idea of Gabriel standing in a courtroom, facing consequences, should have satisfied me. But all I felt was a hollow ache. Winning in court wouldn't erase the betrayal. It wouldn't give me back the years I had believed love was enough. What I wanted was something different. I wanted to stand again, not just as a mother wronged, but as a woman who could not be erased. One evening, as I walked through the narrow streets near Place d'Etereau, I saw children laughing outside a bakery, chasing each other while their parents sipped coffee. I thought of Gabriel as a boy, chasing pigeons in this very square, his laughter ringing brighter than the bells of the Hetel d'Yville. Where had that boy gone? Buried under ambition, under greed, under the whispers of a woman who saw me as an obstacle, I went back to the apartment and opened my notebook. On the last page I wrote, I will not spend the rest of my life haunted by his betrayal. I will spend it building something he cannot touch. The next morning, Clara asked me what I wanted to do with my house. It's still legally yours. You can move back, or we can force a sale, or... I interrupted her. I don't want that house anymore. It's full of ghosts. I want a new start. A place that belongs only to me. She studied me carefully. Then that's what we'll do. But Madam Martin, think also about what you want your life to mean from now on. You fought. You've won. What comes next is entirely yours to decide. Her words lingered. For the first time in years, I realized my life wasn't just about survival. It was about choice. I had been forced into a corner, and I had clawed my way out. Now I stood at the edge of something bigger than revenge. That night, I dreamed of chalkboards again, of standing in front of students with wide eyes, teaching them about the power of words, the weight of silence, the courage to question. When I woke, I knew my fight wasn't just against Gabriel. It was against the lie that age makes you disposable. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the sunrise spill gold across the rooftops. My battle was not yet over, but I had already won the first war. And as the city came alive outside, I whispered to myself, this is only the beginning. When the court battles ended and the papers were signed, a strange silence fell over me. It wasn't the heavy silence of the nursing home, where despair floated in the air like dust. No, this was a lighter silence, almost fragile, as though life itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to decide what would come next. For the first time in years, there was no obligation pulling at me, no hands demanding, no voices pressing me into corners. Just me, 60 years old, alive, bruised, but not broken. I rented a small studio near the Seine River. It wasn't much white walls. A little balcony with rust on the railings, a narrow bed, but it was mine. Mine in a way that even my old house no longer felt. That house had been my pride, yes, but it was also the scene of betrayal. I couldn't walk back into those rooms without hearing Gabriel's voice telling neighbors I was confused, without picturing Camille slipping the keys into her bag as if I no longer existed. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away, even from the walls you built with your own hands. Every morning, I took slow walks by the river. The air smelled of coffee and bread drifting from the Boulingries, the streets alive with cyclists and students rushing to class. I watched life unfold around me and thought, I am still part of this world. I still have a place in it. One afternoon, Clara joined me for tea. Papers were stacked in her bag, as always, but she spoke softly, not like a lawyer, but like the young woman who once sat in my classroom with hope in her eyes. "You've regained control of everything," she reminded me. "The house, the accounts, the insurance policies. It's all legally secured under your name. Now the question is, what do you want to do with it?" I stared into my teacup, watching the steam swirl like smoke signals from the past. For so long my life had been about giving everything to one person, Gabriel. I never imagined a future where my sacrifice would turn into betrayal. But perhaps the lesson wasn't that love had failed. Perhaps the lesson was that love needed to be shared wider, beyond the narrow borders of blood and inheritance, that evening. I wandered into a community centre I had passed many times but never entered. Inside, volunteers were handing out food baskets to elderly couples. Some walked slowly with canes, others carried the weight of invisible loneliness on their shoulders. I struck up a conversation with a woman named Myrail. She was 72, with kind eyes but tired hands. She told me her daughter lived abroad and rarely called. "They forget we are still here," she whispered, adjusting her scarf. "They forget we still need to feel useful." Her words sank into me. I saw myself reflected in her, in every wrinkled face in that room. I realized that my story, painful as it was, wasn't unique. How many other mothers and fathers had been left behind, their names erased from bank accounts, their homes taken from under them, their dignity stolen with a signature. I wasn't just one woman wronged. I was one face in a sea of silenced voices. That night, I opened my notebook again. On the first empty page I wrote, legacy, not revenge. Not bitterness, legacy. I made appointments with directors of NGOs across Lyon. Some focused on elder care, others on legal aid, others on transport for those too old to drive, but too young to surrender their independence. I sat in their offices and asked questions like I used to ask my students. What do you need most? Where does money vanish fastest? What change would you make if resources weren't scarce? They showed me numbers, yes, but more than that, they showed me faces. An old man scammed out of his pension by a fraudulent phone call. A widow forced to sell her apartment because her children claimed she couldn't manage on her own. Women my age who whispered that their sons had taken their bank cards and left them with nothing but grocery money. Every story carved itself into me. Every story was another reminder that betrayal of the elderly wasn't an isolated cruelty. It was happening quietly, everywhere, behind closed doors. And I had the means to do something. Weeks later, Clara and I sat at my small kitchen table, documents spread out before us. "You're certain about this?" she asked. "Yes," I said. My voice did not tremble. Every euro, every property deed, every insurance policy. I want it all directed into trusts and donations for organizations that defend the elderly. Legal funds, social services, care programs. I want my life's work to mean something beyond my son's greed. She studied me for a long time, then nodded. "Then that's what we'll do. But Elise, this will sever the last tie between you and Gabriel." I looked out the window at the river glinting in the sunlight. That tie was cut the day he abandoned me. What I'm doing now isn't punishment. It's freedom. The process took months. Lawyers filed documents, banks established trusts, NGOs signed agreements. And slowly, what had once been my personal estate became something larger than me. A legal safety net for women like Myrail. A transport program for men too frail to carry groceries, but too proud to ask neighbors. Workshops teaching elders how to recognize scams. A grant for elderly women starting over after financial exploitation. It was no longer mine. It was ours. Word spread quietly in the community. Some whispered that I had lost my mind, giving away what could have been a comfortable inheritance. Others said I was noble. I didn't care what they thought. I knew what I had done. I had turned my son's betrayal into a shield for others. I had taken the knife he put in my back and forged it into a key. Meanwhile, Gabriel's life unraveled. I didn't need to see it. Word reached me through neighbours, through whispers in cafes. His business suffered heavy losses after a risky investment collapsed. Camille, who had once walked through my house like a queen, left him without so much as a backward glance. I heard she returned to her family in Bordeaux, taking whatever valuables she could carry. One evening, as I watered the little plants on my balcony, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. When I answered, the voice on the other end was broken, almost childlike. "Maman." I closed my eyes. I didn't speak. He continued, his words stumbling. I lost everything. Camille is gone. The business collapsed. I don't know what to do. I don't even know who I am anymore. The silence between us stretched like a tight rope. Finally, I said, "You are a man who forgot his mother was still alive. That is who you are." His voice cracked. I was wrong. I thought I was protecting myself, protecting us. But I destroyed everything. "Please tell me what to do," I sighed, feeling the weight of years pressing down on my chest. "Gabriel, I cannot teach you how to rebuild your life. You must learn that on your own. I gave you everything once. I cannot give you more. Not money. Not inheritance. Not the home you tried to steal. I gave it all to those who needed it more than you ever did." There was a gasp on the line, disbelief sinking into silence. "You gave it away. All of it." "Yes," I said softly, "because love is not meant to be hoarded. And legacy is not meant to rot in greedy hands." The line went quiet. Then a faint sob. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I closed my eyes. "I forgive you, Gabriel. But forgiveness does not mean inheritance. Forgiveness means I will not let your betrayal chain me anymore." I hung up before he could respond. My hands shook, not from fear, but from release. For the first time, the weight was gone. Weeks later, the community centre invited me to speak at a seminar on elder justice. The hall was filled with older women and men, some leaning on canes, some clutching folders of legal documents they barely understood. I stood at the podium and felt the same nerves I once felt in front of a classroom. But this time, my lesson wasn't about literature. It was about survival. "They will call you old," I said, my voice steady. "They will call you a burden. They will smile while signing your name away. But listen to me, you are not powerless. You are not invisible. You still have the law. You still have your voice. And even if your family betrays you, you can still reclaim your dignity." I stand here as proof. The room erupted in applause. Some cried openly. A woman came to me afterward, hugged me tight, and whispered, "Thank you." I thought I was losing my mind. Now I know I am not alone. That night, I returned to my little apartment, lit a candle, and opened my notebook. On the last page I wrote, "They tried to bury me, but I was a seed. And now I have grown into something larger than myself." When I put down the pen, I realized I was no longer the woman who entered that nursing home broken and betrayed. I was something else now. I was free. And freedom, I learned, is not the absence of betrayal. It is the refusal to let betrayal define the end of your story. I poured myself a cup of jasmine tea, sat on my balcony overlooking the river, and breathed in the night air. The city pulsed with life, and so did I. I was not at the end. I was at the beginning.